So for the relationship analysis project, instead of choosing a movie or a book to analyze, I chose to do it on a specific episode from the Friends series, the 1994 sitcom. So basically, I don't know if any of you have seen Friends, but to sum it up, it's basically a show about like the personal and professional lives of six like 20 to 30 year olds named Ross Geller, Rachel Green, Joey Tribbiani, Chandler Bing, and Phoebe Buffay. Um, so Joey's a struggling actor, Monica's a chef, Rachel's a waitress who wants to work in fashion, and Ross is a paleontologist. Chandler hates his job in data processing, and Phoebe is a wannabe musician. And basically, over the course of like the 10 years in the series, the friends go through life lessons, family, love, interests, careers, and friendships, all kind of to learn the importance of like having friends. Um, yeah, so I wanted to specifically touch base on a specific episode in season three. It's called the one where Ross and Rachel take a break. I'm sure that you've heard the saying, like, we were on a break. That's where this comes from. And throughout this presentation, that's what I'm going to touch base on and analyze. So, on and off, Rachel and Ross, they've always been pretty close throughout all the seasons, and kind of in and out of things. They've been with other partners, and somehow they always end up falling back onto each other. And the scene specifically that is kind of problematic and that I want to analyze is basically so Ross is at Monica's, his sister's, waiting for Rachel to come home from work and celebrate their anniversary, because at this point in season three they were still together, and so they were going to celebrate their anniversary. So when Ross calls Rachel, she's at work, and Rachel tells him that it's unlikely she'll make it back for the night in order to go out for their date night, and Ross decides to go to Rachel's work with a picnic basket and surprise her. And Rachel tells him that she doesn't have the time or the need to hang out with Ross at work, and he continues to get in her way and bother her until she pesters him to just leave. And so later that night, when she gets home, she's expecting Ross to, like apologize for bugging her at work. And Ross doesn't apologize, but they do end up arguing. And Ross brings up his jealous feelings for Mark, Rachel's coworker, and Rachel decides that she can't really handle the situation anymore, and says that they need to take a break. So that's where that comes from. So after Rachel declared that they would be on a break, Ross decided that he was so hurt that he would go sleep with somebody else. And in the show, it's kind of a big conflict between all the characters of like, was it okay for him to sleep with another woman because they were on a break? Rachel would argue that she's very hurt by the situation and that it wasn't okay for him to go do that. But he kind of defends himself by saying they were on a break, which is fair. So a lot of fans would argue the same thing, saying like whether it was okay for him to sleep with somebody. And after reading lots of articles on communication styles from this class, I can analyze that it doesn't really matter what on a break really means and who was right. That's not really what we're arguing about. It's deeper than all that. So Ross and Rachel were really so focused on which of their definitions of on a break was the right one that they missed the opportunity to actually heal their relationship. If they'd been willing to like give up whose definition was right and actually engaged in the more vulnerable conversation in a better way, they would have worked together to save and restore their relationship and potentially even making it stronger. In most of their arguments between Ross and Rachel, they focused on what was being communicated on the surface rather than trying to get the emotional message and deeper meaning out of things. And I think that Ross and Rachel did this because it required less vulnerability to just focus on like the surface level arguments than it does to engage in a difficult conversation. Because oftentimes it is really hard to actually like talk about your emotional needs with your partner. As like straightforward as that seems, it's not like that all the time. And Ross and Rachel were stuck focusing on the content of the communication and unfortunately didn't know how to tune into the deeper and underlining emotional message that was being communicated. that they both missed the opportunity to help each other in that really hectic moment for the relationship when they were each struggling emotionally. And I think they kind of both acted out of like impulse, fear, and that's why she said that she wanted a break, because she didn't want to touch on the situation and actually engage in it. So after reading articles about communication, you can kind of figure out that like tuning in emotionally to situations is better to actually find out what the true problem is, because I think like I've experienced this a lot where you don't actually get to the root of the problem because you're so caught up in like the now of the situation. But like tuning in to the deeper connection really makes a difference. So later on, after the fact, after the situation, they ended up breaking up for good. But so in the situation of Ross and Rachel's on a break statement, Rachel was just dealing with a lot of hurt because of his betrayal. And she was dealing with the feelings of shame, or Ross was dealing with the feelings of shame for hurting the woman that he loved, and how the two focused on the feelings like underneath the surface. They may not have broken up in the first place. I also think that another really big issue with not touching on the emotional connection an argument rather than just like focusing on the surface level details. Another problem is that they didn't discuss the expectations of like what a break actually meant to them, and that's why they both ended up getting so hurt, because they didn't, touch base underneath the surface level of the situation. So I think if they would have defined like the expectations that they had for each other, if Rachel would have told Ross like what on a break meant and her standards for that, it would have saved them both a lot of trouble in the long run. So to sum things up, all in all, I think that this situation, specifically in the TV series, was a really good example of the situation of defining like your standards for situations and expectations for things, pretty much for any situation it can apply to, and actually digging deep into like your emotional needs instead of just touching on the surface of things. It can save you a whole lot of trouble in every relationship, like friendships, relationships with your partner. There were a lot of different episodes in the series that I could have used to touch base on like a lot of these concepts. This was just a really good one. Yeah, it was cool to pick this project and do it with a show that I enjoy watching on a daily basis and kind of analyze it. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you now have a broader understanding of the communication styles used in the Friends sitcom and what Ross and Rachel could have done better to improve that situation.